was a kid, more than anything, I wanted to be able to talk to animals. I wanted them to talk with me. How many of you had that same idea? A lot of hands. How many of you still have that same idea? I mean, this was always my superpower wish. My superpower wish wasn't to be invisibility, it wasn't to be able to fly, it was to be able to talk to the animals and have the animals talk to me. That was what I wanted. That was going to be my superpower. And once a year, I was told it was possible. It was possible for me to hear the animals speak. And it had to be true, my Grammy told me. At the stroke of midnight on Christmas Eve, the animals could talk. Any of you know this story from your childhood? No, wow. See, these things that we think are so common to our experience are new to so many other people. Well, I mean, I had sorted the Santa story really early on, but this was truly worth waiting up for. And so I always tried. And I tried and I tried and I tried. I was going to stay up. I slept on the barn. I slept on the front porch with the German shepherds. I was, and I always fell asleep. And my Grammy would say, she stayed up. And she would always tell me, they told me, I'm being told I'm not loud enough for the back row. There we are. Wow. Okay. I would always fall asleep, so I never heard what they said. And my Grammy told me that she stayed up and she heard. And they always said they loved me. And I think it's true. I don't know exactly how she heard the message. The fable, this myth that animals speaking at midnight of Christmas is really old. It's really old in its old world. In fact, it's much like Christmas. It predates the holiday. Sources argue over its origin. Where did it start? Where was this first idea? But it seems to come back on solstice. And the stories of the solstice stories always start with back when all the animals could talk. Or back when humans and animals could talk to each other. Or back when all brothers and sisters spoke the same language. Yeah. It depends on how far back you go to realize we're all family. So it harkens back to a time when we did not see ourselves as separate from nature, but as a part of nature. And the stories that we tell ourselves, well, they've shifted. And those that have been given voice in the culture are the versions that we remember. The versions that we build our world on. The versions of the stories that you internalize are the versions of the world that you see before you now. Facts don't matter. I'll say that again because here it's a UU church. We're based on reason. What do you mean facts don't matter? Facts don't matter. Only belief. Our subconscious mind, whose lingua franca is the symbol and the image, is what shapes our reality. I say facts don't matter, and yet our inner self, our deeper consciousness, always yearns for authenticity. We long for truth far more than we yen for facts. In our modern age, no other property has separated us from the natural world than the construct that humans alone are capable of language. I'll say that again because it impacts. I believe, from the research and the life that I've had, that this is one of the keystone elements of how we see our world. I believe it's the imperial toxic seed of this idea that has separated us from other humans as well. Not just from other non-human animals, not just from the natural world, but from each other. My favorite book as a kid was Dr. Dolittle. Anybody know this? Yeah. Yes, the horribly racist version. And no, you cannot read it to your children or your grandchildren. And I'm serious about that. I discovered that when my son was small, and I went to the library. I'm like, I love these books. I'm going to read them. I'm opening up page 1. I'm going, oh, I'm not going to be able to read this. I did not remember that. How many of you read the books as a kid? How many of you remembered how racist they were? No. Not at all. That is white privilege. Even though I had a UU mother who was marching for equal education with me in a stroller through the streets of Boston, she was reading me these stories at night. It's part of my own racist white privilege history. It's part of how I see the world, even as I educate myself over and over and over. It's ubiquitous in our society. We're just starting to wake up. And there is a censored version of the Lofting book, he's the author of Dr. Dolittle, that was put out. It's worse. I'm sorry, it's worse because what they've done is they've taken out everything overt and they have not removed any of the colonialism. It's the racism stays in unspoken clues, much like it has been pervasive in our society in unspoken clues. But I'm off point. Dr. Dolittle was my childhood hero. And so what does it mean to have a childhood hero that is this dark underbelly? I have to be able to look at both of those. But today, I want to look at the fact that Dr. Dolittle could talk to animals. Anybody know how? His parrot taught him. His parrot, named Polynesia, who was gray with some red tail feathers, so probably not from Polynesia, for anybody that knows anything about parrots. And in the last book, she got to retire back to Africa. Which is interesting, because obviously Lofting discovered that much. Why could he speak to animals? Because Polly had mastered all of the languages of all the animals and English. So when I was thinking that I wanted my animals to speak to me, really what I was asking for was that they would speak English to me. Because I speak English. My grandmother as a child maybe wanted her animals to speak to her in French. I don't know. I love that part. I love the part that the parrot taught it because at that moment my cat was busily trying to teach me cat. Sadly, my cat did not know English, and most of the lessons involved scratching. My favorite childhood story, my favorite childhood Christmas story, is by one of my idols, fellow Unitarian Universalist Beatrix Potter. Actually, she was only a Unitarian because we hadn't merged back then. Any of you know this? This Christmas story? As a kid, I thought it was a UU saint. I went to a parochial school during the week, and they had saints, and we didn't. But Beatrix Potter was a Unitarian, so she was my UU saint. After all, she could talk to animals and understand them. And even if my mice would not allow themselves to be dressed up, her mice were clothes. And did you know she had a pet bat? She had a pet bat. She was the coolest. You know, and she was also an only child. I'm an only child. What could be better? She drew all the time. Anyway, the book. The book is The Tailor of Gloucester. Anybody know it? If you don't, this is your reconnect with your childhood read. Go get it from the library or buy it, a little hardcover. Don't just do the Kindle version. Okay. In it, Simpkin, a cat who does not speak but totally understands English, is also the tailor's housekeeper. And the mice wear wonderful outfits that the tailor has after you cut. There's like little scraps. Well, the mice take all the little scraps and turn them into these fabulous outfits because this is set way back when, where they're like big pantaloons and they've got periwigs and little vests. Anyway, the tailor falls ill and he's got an important coat and waistcoat to make for the mayor's wedding, which is happening on Christmas Day. The Christmas Eve arrives and he's still sick in bed. The clocks strike midnight. And all the animals could talk because that's part of the legend, that they could speak from midnight until dawn, which means that not only could they speak English, because, you know, in pre-Britain, they could speak English, but cats and mice could understand each other. And eventually, of course, the mice saved the day. They complete all the work with the tiny little stitches. So the tailor's life is saved, this shop is saved, and Christmas is saved, all because everybody could understand and help each other out. I mean, this magical story, Potter's magical Christmas story, is the true spirit of the holiday. It is through community and acts of caring compassion that we are saved. We are saved by what gifts we bring and give, not by what we take and receive. And since its publication, Ms. Potter's work has been translated into more than 35 languages. Before I began studying animal languages, I'm still only a rudimentary student, I'm working really hard, but I really was wishing that, as I said, that they spoke English. How about you? Anybody ever give a thought to the fact that they didn't speak the language that if you were going to, those childhood wishes, what was your wish? Which brings me back to the imperialism and speciesism of Dr. Dolittle. In indigenous traditions around the globe, ancient tales tell of a time when all beings spoke the same language, if only for a night. The story that none of you know, that I was told by my Grammy, is a common story in most of Europe, for a generation above us. It goes way, way back, but it doesn't stay, and it's not centered in Europe. This goes to every indigenous story that we have. There was a time when all beings understood each other, if only for one night, when everything has gone dark, a moment when the world has simply seemed left, and we feel bereft. The nighttime solstice. With the horror stories of recent environmental events, and they are horror stories, they're coming into our chalice, we need to wake up to this. It is the one single most moral, ethical, and spiritual calling that we have. These latest reports of future ecological disasters, I really can think of no better time to look at these ancient tales used by our ancestors to rekindle the light of hope and to start our listening. These times when we are really, truly killing our planet, we are killing our sacred mother, our Mary, who gave birth to all of us, inseminated from a distant star, furred, feathered, scaled, and skinned, rooted or roving, flying and forgiving. These solstice, Yuletide, holy stories seem to break into two basic tracks. One, in which humans listen to the animals speak and then suffer terrible events, usually after overhearing the animals' own tales of suffering. Or two, those in which the humans, after listening to the animals praise, sing, or gives gifts, are reminded to act with greater compassion and acts of service. So those are the two kinds of stories that we have. They kind of go back. The first kind, they range from mild, the most common, which was the souring of milk, because you overheard the animals speaking, then the Christmas day's milk had all gone sour, to the horrific, which included immediate loss of life and possibly dismemberment. These ancient stories also echo the sacrifices of lambs and goats and innocent babies as they grow up, as consequences abound. I also found what seems to be two tandem versions of the serpent story in Genesis, which I think is kind of interesting. The loss of immortality comes with the gaining of knowledge. That's the Genesis story. The awareness of time hinders us from the eternal now. Once you become aware of time passing, you have a difficult time being in the present. We're called to hold both of those things. That is our immortality. We have no sense of time. That moment when we and nature are one. Tract 2 is based on balance and modeling of gratitude from the deer, the stories of the deer that kneel at the zenith of the solstice, which are all over Canada and the Northern America. You have these stories where at the winter solstice, deer, moose, they're found on their knees. The missionaries that would come changed it from the solstice to Christmas Eve, and all the animals were kneeling in order to honor the birth of Christ. But the event may be true or maybe not, but it says something about walking humbly in your world. Later, those stories also became, and they spoke to us, and they told us to walk humbly with our world. The first are stories of caution, the others are stories of action. But the common thread in both of these types of stories is the idea that there's something miraculous that occurs, and that idea has been lost over time by inattention, by greed, or by selfishness. Both of these tracts of stories call us back to being kinder, being more gentle, and being humble in our world. I just have to say, and this is a terrible pun, there's a honey of a tale that comes from the British Isles, where it says, the bees hum Christmas hymns to herald the birth of Christ. Anybody hear of this one? See, that's why we're going to tell these stories, because the bees hum. And in 1752, by decree, the British calendar changed from Julian to Georgian. Most people know that at some point the calendar changed, right? Well, that of course did what? It changed Jesus' birthday. No! Yes! This is a big deal. This was a big deal. And see, in Scotland and in northern England, believing the bees over the human heralds that were coming out of the crown or out of Rome, they decided to watch the bees. So farmers and townsfolk all over went to the beehives on both dates to see when the bees were going to hum. Apparently the bees, disliking the new date, hummed with great voracity on the old date and affirmed the first Julian date. I wonder, there's no mention if they were actually humming on the solstice. It would just be interesting to find out if that was part of the natural clock that they reset themselves with, but that's not anything that I could find. One of my favorite books, however, is The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. See, you have, in that, there is the reference to the bees humming at Christmas. And so we have that story there. And August, one of the main characters, he says, he reminds us that we can listen to the hive buzzing. If we can listen to the hive buzzing at any time, if we can pay attention and listen to the hive buzzing, we will hear the whole Christmas story. That story of rebirth, that story of kindness, that story of generosity. So whether one follows the sacred ways of the bee through shamanism or science, their voices truly are heralds of the earth, one which we have to listen to today, because the bees are crying out for us to listen. And we need to listen to them for the story of Christ. Ancient tales from the Baltic and Slavic regions teach us that in order to hear the animals speak, we have to wear special shoes. Of course we do. I would like red shoes. I see all these wonderful red shoes. I'm loving these red shoes. But actually it's not red shoes. You need to put pine or ferns in your shoes, special sacred pines. And it leads me to deeper inquiry. These were special shoes. What does that mean? Doesn't it itch? How do you walk with pine? Are they the cones? No, really. What it means is harkening back to listening with our feet, not only our ears. Listening to stories of walking in the woods. Our stories evolve. Our culture evolves. So I become more concerned about what pine hurt in my shoes, rather than what would it mean to take off my shoe and stand in the forest. So as I'm following all these stories through time, I'm starting to be confronted by questions, because ours is a questioning faith. And I come up with 5 basic ones. They're big. First, what does it mean for animals to speak? Second, what does it mean to be able to listen to them? Third, what does it mean to speak? Fourth, what does it mean to listen? 5, what is at the sacred core of understanding? So first, what does it mean for animals to speak? Well, the first thing it means is that I'm not an animal, because I've separated them out. So I have to put myself back in and say, what does it mean for animals to speak? I think for me, as I've reiterated beyond, it meant they spoke my language, English, and I would understand it. It never occurred to me that hearing them speak would endanger me or portend my death, like in some of those stories, or that my milk would sour. But more importantly, it never occurred to me that they had their own voice. In all these stories, the other animals are being given a human voice. It never occurred to me that they had their own voice. How about you? Secondly, what does it mean to be able to listen to them? Foremost in these stories, to listen to animals, we must remind us. Foremost in these stories, to listen to the animals seems to remind us that we must listen to our inner human voices to be generous and not greedy. That's the voice we're listening to when we put a voice into the mouth of an animal in the story. That is giving us a lesson. Not to be kind, not abusive. To be generous, not greedy. To honor all of creations and not ourselves in it. But in practice, it means we must stop assuming that humans are the only ones with language. And for a simple start, recognizing that language need not be spoken. We could start by honoring all humans who speak sign language as being wholly human. Language need not be spoken. Next, we can honor it by all those who do not speak the same language as we do, or claiming that one language is superior to another, or that one language is superior because it's written down. How many of you could memorize the entire Quran? I could not. being able to do that memory, that level of memory of story is rapidly being lost because it's been devalued. Third, what does it mean to speak? Once I stop taking it apart, when I say, what does it mean to speak with the animals? What does it mean to speak in general? What does that look like? Does it mean to communicate, or does it mean more? I mean, does it mean everybody's using the same signals, like the universal smile? Everybody smiles. Most mammals smile. Everybody smiles. I mean, does it mean the exact same signals? It can't be. We're all unique. When I say mom, I mean something different than when you say mom. And my son's means something different when he says mom. And yet, if I say ama, I am also saying mom in a different language. And that means something different as well. My dogs may bark, howl, whimper, but is that their voice? Is that their voice more than their tail wag, or their front paws bouncing down, or their head turns? Dr. I always do this, Slobochikov. I've never heard it pronounced. Slobochikov? Dr. Slobochikov, he's brilliant. He's written a book called Chasing Dr. Dolittle. I love this book. Urging us onward, he urges us on to a true operational definition of language that is based on evolution and biology and independent criteria, not on archaic ideas of human exceptionalism and the divine right. On a deeper level, I go in a different place. Although I love this book. This is a Sunday. This is a sermon. What does it mean to give voice to something? What does it give voice to give? What does it mean to give voice to someone? And when we ask that, we also have to ask, who do you not give a voice to? Who are you not giving a voice to? Henry David Thoreau wrote in 1849, it takes two to speak the truth. One to listen, and one to speak. Fourth, what does it mean to listen? I thought contrite, is she going to go? Is she lost? Is she lost? I hear the sound of this. What does it mean to listen? Recently I heard several people lament about the noise in the modern world. They were lamenting the quietness of nature. Aww, anybody ever been in the swamp in the spring? Right. Yeah. Just say it. It's our own inner chatter that is so loud that we cannot hear. That's what is so loud. It's this incessant writing of a narrative and a monologue that keeps us from being able to develop those deeper listening skills. Those deeper essential skills that we have to be able to listen. Whether we're listening to our true selves, to other humans, to other species, to rocks, to trees, to water flowing. Poets like Gary Snyder and Patty Ann Rogers, I don't know if you know them. If you don't, look them up and read them. And there's many, many, many more. They speak to the silences and noise of our destruction and our survival. They're truly eco-poets. Meditate daily. You hear that all the time from this pulpit, from not just me. Meditate daily. Sit in silence. Quiet your voice and discover how loud the natural world is. Sit with a friend without waiting to respond. Sit with your child, or your dog, or your cat, or your bird without becoming their parent or their owner. Just sit with them and be with them. Sit as you stand. Sit as you dance. Zazen can happen anywhere. Sit in the present without your own agenda. Even if that agenda is to sit in the present. That is listening. And finally, 5. What is at the sacred core of understanding? That may be what we are striving for when we use words like spirituality. What does that mean? What is at the sacred core of understanding? I don't know. I cannot stand here responsibly from this pulpit and give you any kind of answer. But I can try in what my inquiry is showing. The sacred core of understanding is like a glimmering of knowing, a shimmering of understanding. Like beginning to understand that knowledge is never static, beginning to understand that knowledge is always flowing, beginning to understand that communication is always multi-directional, growing and expansive event. So possibly the sacred core of understanding that is key to all communication is love, in all her flexible, expansive, ever-changing, forgiving resiliency. But we have to listen to that, to be part of that, because our world needs right now, more than it perhaps needs anything else, flexible, expansive, forgiving resiliency. In Christmas tales, solstice tales, through stories, psalms, and hymns, we are reminded that Jesus is our brother. Before we had a religion that declared him a savior, he, like us, was a child of God, a sacred offspring of a holy act. As the animals praise the miracle of life, we are reminded to do so. Ancient stories give us the same message. We are family. No matter how fractured we feel, no matter where we are on the planet, no matter what we are surrounded by, we are family with each other, with every species, with every plant, with this rock, and with the stars. In my UU Sunday school, we sang Friendly Peace song at Christmas time, every Christmas, and I loved it. That's why I chose it for this sermon. At its core, the message is about giving the unique gift each of us have to give. That is worship. We are called to love and give our own unique selves to the world. What would Jesus do? Perhaps that is exactly what he did. Jesus, our brother, kind and good. What are you willing to give to your siblings in the world? Are you willing to listen to this creation, this holy season? Becoming forgiving, resilient. Are you ready to answer with love? We all have gifts. What gifts do you bring to save the world? Merry Christmas. Happy solstice. Blessed be. Namaste.
Namaste.
Shalom.